the recent apologies from Love Island alone is that there's no accountability. A lot of times when there's a lack of accountability or even acknowledging that something was wrong, that can often change just the public perception, and we're not taking you serious. It sort of reminds me, we're so desensitized to, let's say, like advertisements, for example. We know when something's organic, we know when something's paid, and we're seeing so much of the paid forced in our faces. We're seeing so much of these public apologies. Too many Notes app apologies have been fed to us over the years that now we're so quick to call bull.
Hello, I'm Brianna Doe, and this is Stop the Scroll. So let's get into the content that makes us stop, click, and care. Okay, so before anything else, I just have to say it's taken us approximately 7,000 years to get in one virtual room together, but I'm so excited to chat with this person today. If you don't know Tiff Knighten, one, you live under a rock, and two, you should know her. So she's an award-winning PR strategist, founder of Brand Curators, which is a PR and brand management agency. She's also just a complete delight and maybe the smartest person I've ever met. So thank you for joining me today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so gagged. Thank you, Brie. What an intro. I'm so happy to be in a virtual room with you. And obviously, you know that I stand Stop the Scroll for many reasons. And so just being able to be here is a full circle moment.
Oh, I appreciate you so much. Okay, so we have talked about this a little bit, but I would love to dive into it with you fully and nerd out on it. I don't even know where to start. So do you watch Love Island?
I do watch Love Island. I have been, as you know, I've been traveling for the last few weeks without a VPN. So I'm still catching up. I know, I'm still catching up on the recents, even though there's been a lot spoiled to me via the timeline.
Okay, so I don't know if this is a spoiler, but maybe you've heard about Alana. So on Love Island USA. Okay, so for those who don't know, on Love Island USA, there was a girl named Alana who entered in Casa Amor, and she was kicked off unceremoniously when like videos were leaked, I think from her own friends, of her, you know, saying racial slurs. And it reminded me a lot of Sierra Ortega last year, who was also removed for similar things and then issued like this. I mean, some thought it was a good apology. I thought it was like kind of a weird apology. Alana just released hers too. And so I would love to actually start there because I think she's not really getting the reception that she thought. People aren't thinking she wasn't taking it seriously. I'm curious, one, do you think public apologies actually do anything, or have they become more of just a ritual that we go through?
We have a lot of thoughts on this. That's why we're here today. I will say that as a publicist, you know, we go through the crisis communications training of it all, and we talk really in depth about what makes a good apology, what makes a not so good apology, and what can happen when you don't have a good apology. And so as we start to dissect some of the examples that we're going to talk about, I'm going to start to put in some of that methodology throughout the conversation. But one thing about, I would say, like the recent apologies from Love Island alone is that there's no accountability. A lot of times when there's a lack of accountability or even acknowledging that something was wrong, that can often change just the public perception, and we're not taking you serious. It sort of reminds me, we're so desensitized to, let's say, like advertisements, for example. We know when something's organic, we know when something's paid, and we're seeing so much of the paid forced in our faces. We're seeing so much of these public apologies. Too many Notes app apologies have been fed to us over the years that now we're so quick to call bullshit. And so if we're not believing that you really meant it, no, it's not going to land. And we can go deeper into that, but I just have to start there.
Well, one, I love that because the minute you started talking, I thought of all the Notes app apologies. I do wonder, do you think it's always a good idea? I know always is a very big word, but like, do you think it's always a good idea to do a video apology? Because I feel like that could backfire too, right? Especially if you're not being authentic. Alana.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that this is why, you know, you talk to your crisis communications team. I know not everyone has that at their disposal, but that's actually why specifically big firms that do crisis communications get paid the big bucks, because there's an assessment of that where it's like, is it something that, you know, depending on who you are and the time and place, is it something that requires a press conference? Obviously, maybe you're a public figure or you're a government official or something like that, and people need to see the sincerity of your face, and you're someone who's already public facing, and so that might be a little bit easier. for a person like that. But when it comes to what we're talking about, reality stars, social media influencers, that might not be the best idea because, yeah, I could see, Alana or Sierra Ortega making a video and we're just like, girl, you don't look sorry enough. You don't look like we're not, even like an accidental smirk somewhere. Now everyone's like, oh my God, she's so smug. That could backfire so quickly. But being able to just like first and foremost be like, I'm acknowledging what I did wrong. This happened. And I just want to address that this thing happened is at bare minimum the very first step, but you'll see a lot of apologies where that step is completely skipped and they might go straight into coming up with some sort of excuse for it or kind of word vomiting about the situation without saying this is the thing that went wrong that everybody's upset over.
Okay, so I'd love to walk through a couple with you. I have them pulled up over here. One I'll read, it's Bill Clinton's because how iconic. But the other one I'll just kind of summarize. So Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, for those who don't know, I think it was a couple of years ago now, when Danny Masterson from That 70s Show was on trial for horrific crimes, they wrote a letter like in support of him to the courts. And they run, I'm going to blank on the official term, but they run basically an organization that's supposed to support women and children.
Yeah.
That are victims of crimes like this. And so obviously the backlash was swift and it was severe. So they released a video and said, we are aware of the pain that has been caused by the character letters that we wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson. Mila Kunis then went on to say, we support victims. We have done this historically through our work and will continue to do so in the future. Final thing I'll say, Kutcher went on to explain that a couple of months ago, Danny's family reached out to us and they asked us to write character letters to represent the person that we knew for 25 years so the judge could take that into full consideration relative to the sentencing. The letters were not written to question the legitimacy of the judicial system or the validity of the jury's ruling. And they were not to undermine the testimony of the victims, adding, we would never want to do that and we're sorry if that has taken place. They finished it off by saying, our heart goes out to every single person who's ever been a victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse, or rape.
Oof. One glaring mistake. The victims were such an afterthought in that entire statement.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's almost like there's a lot that could have been done differently, but at the very, very least, they could have started with the conflict of interest of the fact that we have advocated for victims always. The victims are number one in this, and I guess they'd have to say, the alleged victims in this, which is already messy. But if it's almost like if you flip that statement, textbook would be a better point of entry, but it's just the straight up alignment. I would say that it's interesting that they kind of went into deeper the reasoning why, where they said like his family asked us to do this. I'd almost count that as an over-explain. I'd be like, hey, like let's not even, because it's kind of obvious, right? Like you guys have a long-standing relationship, but now sometimes when apologies are almost too long, it seems like more of a cover-up. And that's how they're perceived anyways. So sometimes you want to just be quick and say that the victims, that was number one. We know that is counterintuitive to what we're doing in our work.
Do you think there's a world in which somebody shouldn't apologize at all? Like, do you think it would have been better for them not to say anything in this case than to say what they actually said?
That's such a good question, Bree, because there are a lot of instances where I feel like as a publicist, I'm like, oh my God, say nothing. But it's not always the best, when you don't say anything, the rule of thumb is that you allow other people to carry a narrative for you. So then narratives can actually run wild, and that can also lead to just way worse backlash because there's stories that you're not getting in front of. And that's why if you do acknowledge something like this, it's better to just be pretty brief about it, especially if it's already severe enough. Like everything they said, it's just not going to be received no matter what. And at the bare minimum, just to be able to say like, that was totally against like the work that we're doing and victims, and just kind of leave it at that and not go into too much detail is probably just the best thing that they can do without creating new problems.
Is there an apology that you think was done exceptionally well?
That's a great question. It's just funny because so many of these are really rough, but I will say that some of the best apologies, in my opinion, can be apologies that you get in and you say, this is what I did wrong. Oftentimes it's like, this is how I'm going to fix it, or this is how we're going to do right. And call us out on our bullshit. We appreciate that. And I think there's a few brands that have been more savvy in being able to approach the apology that way, because they know that it's not going to make everybody side with them or do better. I'll have to think of some more examples the more we discuss that I can kind of point to that I feel like are good ones. Unfortunately, there are just so many bad ones.
There are so many to choose from. It was actually hard to narrow down the list. And I do think if it is an exceptionally good apology, you're probably not going to remember it because you've moved on from what they did because they apologized so well.
Yes, that's a great point. But like, you notice how you always remember the ones where people have fumbled, the ones where you're just kind of like, where was the acknowledgement? I have to give another example of a bad one while it's on top of my mind, just because we're talking about reality TV.
Please do.
You're caught up with, you know, the West Wilson and Amanda Batula of it all on Summer House.
I knew you were going to say Summer House.
I got it.
I knew it.
I actually can't stop talking about Summer House. It's like, it's over and I still can't stop talking about it.
Of course not. It's incredible.
It's incredible. And for those who like are, you know, probably even if you're not in tune with Summer House, you're likely being force-fed Summer House content because of how big the situation got. But main character Amanda Batula, who has been married to Kyle, another main character on the show, for the whole time that they've been on the show, was hooking up with her former best friend Sierra's ex-boyfriend, West Wilson. And they were doing so in secret. And as everything started to come out, everybody basically found out from this joint statement on social media, because they were lying to their friends until all of a sudden one day, after much speculation, they posted a we statement story apology. So I'll let you read it, Brie, and then we'll dissect.
Yeah, which, mind you, is an insane way to announce it, but we'll dive into that. Okay, insane. So the statement is, we've seen the growing online speculation. So while this is still very new, we wanted to provide some clarity. It was never our intention to purposely hide anything. And I can't even stop smiling. Given the complicated relationship dynamics involved and the scrutiny that comes with being on a reality show, we needed a little space to process things privately before speaking on it. We've shown up for each other as friends over the years through all the highs and lows, and what's developed recently was the last thing either of us expected. Our connection grew out of a long-standing, genuine friendship, which made it especially important for us to approach this with care. As our feelings evolved, we wanted to take time to understand exactly what we were feeling. We also recognize that this has had an impact beyond just us, and never wanted our actions to cause any hurt or be perceived as careless. We truly appreciate the understanding and respect as we navigate this. I must know what you think.
I've been in so many group chats dissecting this. The main thing that stands out for me is just, I mean, I gotta say the first and foremost thing is not acknowledging Sierra and like just personally what they've done to their friend, who this all kind of is about. Obviously Kyle too, but you know, sure. Sierra, our queen. Right. And for me, it's also just, there's a lot of things that are assumed in this, which is just the fact that, oh, okay, so it's confirming that you guys are a couple. It goes straight into these we statements. And I feel like that was just the most laughable, which is just like, we. It's like, okay, so this is you guys reading between the lines, confirming that you're a couple. Mm-hmm. And they've hurt other people in the process, but they're just talking about the privacy that they need now. It all felt self-serving, it felt unserious, and it just felt like, what timelines are we on? We're like in two different timelines.
Well, and I thought it was interesting too, you make an interesting point about assumptions. When I was reading the last part, we truly appreciate the understanding and respect as we navigate this. In back of my head, I'm like, I think it's a funny assumption that I'm understanding or respecting you, like as a viewer. And so I think that's worth calling out too. In an apology, from what I've gathered, you should take accountability, like own up to what you've done wrong and who you've hurt, and then not in the next breath expect or thank the viewer or the reader for some perceived level of support or understanding. It should just be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's something there that they feel like they're owed, where in an apology, this is a public apology. Number one, another funny thing when you like learn more about the situation, they hadn't even apologized to the parties involved.
Right.
And so I think that's another thing. Like if you're a public figure and you directly affect certain communities or people, there needs to be also private conversations that happen. But it's like they were running to talk to their social media followers, and that's just like a funny world that we live in right now. Sometimes the statements can't be videos or can't be press conferences. That's the power of social media, right? That's why we have sometimes these Notes app apologies or these weird Instagram story messages with large text, because it has to happen quick. But I just encourage, like, you can take a little bit of time, maybe consult with some outside parties, and then put something a little bit thoughtful together.
You're being so nice about it, and also simultaneously coming for these Instagram Notes app apologies, because they are also one of my biggest pet peeves. It just feels a little lazy, and I don't know if that's like not a fair take, but you couldn't even, it's a double-edged sword. In my head, I'm like, you couldn't even get on video, but on the other hand, I keep going back to Alana. She's getting raked over the coals right now because of the cuts within the video, which make it seem like she's cutting because she's laughing and then she has to come back. So you really, I guess, can't win to an extent unless you are being totally genuine, which I don't want to assume she's not. But
hey, here's an idea. You can put it on the feed.
We could let it last longer than 24 hours.
Yes, like there's something about it being on the story that is just so funny to me.
That's a good point too.
It's like
you didn't want to let this live.
Pause to read my like serious statement.
For 24 hours. Don't try and find it after that.
Yeah, exactly. Like now we got to screenshot it. Like something about that is just hysterical to me. But at the same time, it's like, that's how news happens. Like when we think about how news would happen before, let's just say like celebrities back in maybe like the early 2000s could have their press person put out a press release, and then of course it's picked up by some of the entertainment, gossip magazines, things like that, and like that's how it becomes kind of more mainstream news. Whereas now somebody posts their 24-hour large text, like God forbid Comic Sans font story. Please don't let it be a crazy font. Use
like Roboto or Times New Roman or something.
Like,
something chill. Fig Tree if you're feeling really spicy.
If you're feeling like really fun, but like not too much. Let's keep it neutral. And now that is what the news outlets report on. Because now we have Us Weekly showing screenshots of Instagram stories. It's reported directly from the source, from the Instagram story. So it is going to be a double-edged sword no matter what, but I think the biggest thing, besides just like taking responsibility, it's almost like it is a little bit get in, get out, but be serious about who you're talking to. I have seen some people get on video and like kind of appear like people picking them apart, like their facial expressions, like you seem a little unserious, or wow, I don't see enough sincerity in your face or in your voice. So if you do video, that's something that I think would take a little bit extra care. I think it can be impactful, but it could just as quickly be kind of harmful.
Okay, so you made a really good point about like the news cycles look different, right? I mean, I'm thinking of, I don't know, Mark Wahlberg, and he still gets raked over the coals for this occasionally, but his violent behavior, we'll say, back in the 90s, I'm sure there was a press release. I'm going to assume there was a press release, but it really doesn't get brought up anymore unless you see it in the comment section. There's like a new movie coming out. Somebody says, well, what about this? Why are we still supporting him? How do you think that shapes or shifts the way we, as the viewer or the consumer, receive an apology? Because what used to kind of fade into the ether after the news cycle has passed is now searchable essentially forever. Somebody can clip your worst moment into a TikTok 7 years later and it can pop right back up. So how do you think that's shifted the way, I guess, people handle crisis moments?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think it really depends on how much ownership is really being taken. My rule of thumb in general when it comes to public perception is if you own it, no one can really argue with that. Whether you're right or you're wrong, if you're able to just like own your shit, you're just like, okay, you own your shit. You could be dead wrong, but I'm like, there's something powerful about you owning it. I might not agree, but fine. I think where it really comes back to bite you is when you are someone who's not standing 10 toes down on what you're doing. Either stand 10 toes down and say, yeah, this is out of character, this is what was going on, not proud of it, going through a hard time. Not to say that that's an excuse, but sometimes you're like, yeah, we can clearly see that was so crazy, but what can you say?
Right.
Look, you can't argue with that, right? But
Right.
when there's people who then are shape shifting or maybe going through different phases and not really making sense, and you're kind of like, who are you? I think that's when things come to bite you, where you're kind of like, that person is now a different person than the person we're seeing now, and it can confuse people in that way. People want some sort of familiarity. I mean, I think a great example, not my favorite person at all, Chris Brown and all the things that he's doing. There have been so many apologies from that man, right? I'll never believe them. I'll never care what he has. I will never care what comes out of his mouth. It is one of those things where, if nothing else, he's consistent, and it's not going to ever really come back to bite him. It comes back into the conversation of who's cancelable and who's not.
Yeah.
Some people just really can't be canceled, and people still buy their tickets and sell out their tours.
Exactly. Okay, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was thinking about that while you were talking. I'm so fascinated by like cancel culture and how we essentially decide who stays canceled and who doesn't. And I did like, I don't know, I just kept exploring different creators, celebrities, etc., who've either somehow avoided full cancellation or found a way back versus those who haven't. And I think Chris Brown is an interesting example. And for anybody who listens to this podcast consistently, they're going to think I'm like the biggest Chris Brown hater, which I am.
I am
but
too.
Basically, I can't stand that man. And I just think he's evaded accountability for so long. And I do think, I'm curious what you think, I think a lot of it ties into what your audience has to give up if they cancel you fully. So for Chris Brown, you're giving up, I don't know, 13, 14 years of memories tied to his music. You're giving up this person that you feel like you've grown up with. And do you think, so I think with that in mind, how much does the apology itself matter versus what people already want to believe about a person?
I have another example that I also want to tie this into, because as you said that, I'm thinking, not only is it like, okay, these memories, and yeah, that used to be like one of my favorite songs, it also comes with like your own, how you view your own perception or other people's perception of you, rather. So one example is, you know, if people feel like it's appropriate to sing along to R. Kelly at a party or not. You're kind of like...
Good example. That's right.
And that's me looking
really
around.
good
If you're
example.
just listening to this, you feel like, is this socially acceptable? There's certain things that kind of come with that type of that cancellation. But just to circle back to another example, I mean, we could almost say the same thing about Doja Cat. Remember when she got canceled for showing her feet in the racial chats?
I do. And
But
then
she didn't really get canceled.
No, she's right back where people love her again.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of funny because for me, it was one of those things where she's like, yeah, I did. That's the 10 toes down, no pun intended.
Right.
She's
She's
like,
stuck with it.
She's like, yeah, I did that. And like, that's just, she didn't say this, but again, it's almost easy for someone to kind of create your own narrative when someone is somebody that you are willing to give a pass to, where you're like, yeah, that's kind of her trolling, silly behavior. And it's a little bit a part of her brand. So it's just easier to sort of forgive. And the stakes are lower, right? Like, it's not something as serious as what Danny Masterson and some other, you know, artists and celebrities that we've talked about have done, or like, you know, a cheating scandal and things like that. It's a little bit different in that way, but it still could be something that shapes your idea of their character. But again, the stakes are so much lower, and you can chalk it up to, that's just that artist, and this is how I feel, which is, I'm okay with it.
What do you think about Diddy? He has never issued an apology, has he? I can't fathom that person issuing an apology. But do you think it would do anything if he did? I know that's such a big... I'm like, predict the future, please.
No. I mean, that one is so crazy to me, because I feel like Diddy's dirt is connected to so many people and so many scenarios. Like, what he's done in the hip-hop industry just goes decades deep, with different artists, different people on his team, different victims, different fans. There's
it's incredibly
too much.
sinister.
That is a sinister operation. They need to put him under the jail. But anything that came out of his mouth, and I think he did, and I want to look it up now because I think there was some sort of statement that he had last summer. It wasn't like a full apology, but it was sort of acknowledging, and I think that's a perfect example of why if he ever apologized, like, who would really care? There's just been like too many instances that he has wiped his hands clean of or has been able to skate by that I don't think that it would make a difference in any way, shape possible. Even if it was specific to specific victims, it's never going to be him taking ownership. The track record that he has is more so like, sorry that happened to you. And that's not going to work.
Like, no, that's true.
Sorry that happened to you, but I had nothing to do with it. And things are finally catching up to him. But I will say that's a narcissist. People who are narcissists have to first acknowledge that they did something wrong. And I feel like aren't even capable of faking the funk when it comes to an apology.
That's a good point. And I think I found the apology you're referring to, which I forgot he said this, but I mean, trigger warning, I guess. So he issued this apology a couple days after that video was released of him, attacking his then girlfriend, Cassie. And on Instagram, he posted a video saying, it's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life, but sometimes you got to do that. I was fucked up. I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses.
Exactly.
Oh, and then I take full responsibility for my actions in the video. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I got into therapy. I'm going to rehab. I had to ask God for his mercy and grace. We're going to circle back to that. I'm so sorry, but I'm committed to being a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
What are your thoughts first?
Okay. I hadn't even thought about this, but I'm always really fascinated by especially you find this often with men in power, like in Hollywood, politics, etc. They turn to God in those moments, and I just think that's like the slate being wiped clean for them. It reminds me of what you were saying, like if somebody just owns their stuff, they're like, well, I did it. You can't really argue with that. It almost feels like that when people mention religion in it. And I'm not taking away from anybody who genuinely does have a strong belief system, but I do think it's one of those things where, okay, well, how am I going to argue with that?
That is what stood out for me, because everything that was said in that, I mean, the first part, I feel like he really had to be like, that sounded a little bit more like him at the first part.
Right.
The rest of it, I have like no regrets. But then the rest of it was very much they had the lawyer and comms PR, representative, or maybe it was the lawyer with some training in crisis management, draft the rest of it, because it was very textbook after that. The textbook was like what I'm going to do. A lot of times you want to mention, I'm going to get help. I'm going to, like, these are the next steps. I'll give another example outside of a celebrity like Diddy. A corporation would do something like, we're going to donate these proceeds, right? Or we're going to make sure that we are funding, programs that help this type of community because we're not racist, see? So that's kind of that next step in the apology of like, what are you going to do about it? Traditionally, I don't think it always works, but that's kind of textbook. And then the next thing that was mentioned is, the God of it all, and just bringing in something to help the character is so like, look, see, exactly like what you said. I'm a better person. This is someone that, like, it's above me. I'm a child of God. Don't look at me this way. And it's just like, you could write it in your sleep with what type of statement that would come from a lawyer, for example.
That is so interesting. So agreed on all fronts. And the question that immediately popped into my head, because you're right, you see that often, like, I'm doing X, Y, and Z to rectify this, or because I'm not a bad person. See, I'm donating all this money. I don't know how many folks are then following up. I'm not checking to see if Diddy went to therapy. I'm not looking to see if a corporation donated money. So
it sounds good, though.
It sounds good. And the question that's forming in my head is kind of similar to cancel culture. Even with the apology, it feels like most of the time we are just checking a box. The person issuing the apology is checking a box. We're checking a box. Now we can either be good with this person again or not. But what happens after? Is it even really our business? So what is the point?
I love that question. The point is to clean it up in the moment, get people to stop talking, let the news cycle take it away. That's always the point. The point is, how can we nip it in the bud? And that's why you should technically say something, because if you don't, if you let people continue to pick up the narrative, it can just spiral and go on for days or go on for way too long. And then it's just a bigger conversation. It could get even messier. And one example that kind of comes to mind, and I definitely am trying to kind of think back to that time more specifically, but I want to say the Ellen DeGeneres situation, like when things were going on with her like when that was imploding. I'd have to go back and look. I feel like there was a little bit of silence with her for a bit. But some of those situations where you're not saying something right away, that's when more people start to come out and talk and add to the narrative and build that fire and let it kind of snowball. But if you're able to get in there, say something, whether you gave a shit or not, whether it was good or not, it's like, okay, wow, that was a terrible apology. But then it's like, well, that kind of ended it.
Mm-hmm. That's a
really
really good point.
You don't really say much after that. You're like,
yeah, there's not much you can. Like, which is, I mean, takes you right back to what you were saying at the beginning. Like in the 90s, 2000s, whatever, it was about nipping it in the bud with that news cycle or press cycle. It's the same thing. It's just now that it's modernized, I don't know, the nipping in the bud looks obviously a lot different, and it's a lot easier to wipe the slate clean, I think.
Can I talk about another apology that came to mind during this conversation?
Yeah.
Because when I was talking about the whole example of maybe donating to an organization for people of color because you said something racist, it made me think of Kendall Jenner and Pepsi and her.
I totally forgot about that. That was embarrassing. I'm not going to lie.
That was so embarrassing. I know she was praying that something else big would happen so everybody would stop talking about it. But
did she apologize?
Pepsi put out this apology, and Pepsi's apology said, Pepsi was trying to project a global message of unity, peace, and understanding. Clearly, we missed the mark, and we apologize. We did not intend to make light of any serious issue. We are removing the content and halting any further rollout. We also apologize for putting Kendall Jenner in this position, and that was 2017. Feels like forever ago, but I'll never forget Kendall Jenner and Pepsi trying to like...
God, that was a nightmare.
And
I feel like that was a good apology.
So I will say, if we were to dissect it based on what we've talked about in the training, they were straight up like, yeah, we missed the mark. If you're able to just get on there and be like, we fucked up. That was ridiculous. And sorry to everybody involved. Let's pull it. Let's pretend like it didn't happen. Honestly, yeah. But then there's brands like Zara, who I feel like every time, is it Zara and H&M? I feel like there's a few fashion brands who have been like, yeah, we did that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they don't care. Like American Eagle. I think they actually ended up apologizing, I think. If they did, it took a really long time. For the Sydney Sweeney stuff, it took a very long time. And I wouldn't even really say it was an apology. It was more of like a, sorry that happened to you. Like, I don't really know.
Like, y'all still want to buy some jeans or nah?
Right. The tours are open. So, yeah, I think that's a good example of what not to do.
Yeah, I mean, everything's still up. I feel like they actually doubled down. I think they put out more, like, jean ads with Sydney Sweeney. They didn't use the same tagline, but it was also very tongue-in-cheek. And it's just, that's one of those things that's a perfect example of, like, they're going to put something out, so you guys stop talking. But a lot of times they're still going to do them. But I feel like I've seen a lot of fashion brands sort of do things like that because at the end of the day, capitalism.
Well, and it also depends, I think, greatly on who your audience is. It's making me think of all the creators who get caught doing something questionable or bad. And so then they just kind of like switch sides. And I'll just say it, like go for like the MAGA audience who will accept them with open arms. American Eagle, it's like, I don't think I'm your target. So it's okay. Go off, I guess. And you're just doubling down and accepting that your audience has shifted.
100%. They know that they still have an audience. The stakes might be different in a different scenario where it's like, whoa, like the public is mad. It's going to be hard to bounce back from this. But for them, they're like, sorry to some of y'all.
Right.
Right. And
anyway,
that's what they're
to the
saying.
Rest of you. Yeah.
Right.
So I guess to your point, like, okay, what I'm hearing is if you care about your audience shifting, say something, apologize and own it, make sure it's a strong, clear apology, full of accountability. preferably no facetious mentions of your new religious focus, unless that is something you're actually authentically experiencing.
Right.
If you don't care that your audience is shifting, or if you're embracing the shift, there is a bit more leeway there, but you're also painting, or you're drawing a pretty solid line in the sand.
There's definitely a risk, but that's a shift that you take. But as we talk more about specifically creators, like we were just mentioning, I think about how one thing that you don't do is I've seen a lot of creators who have gone ahead and just turned their comments off and maybe even just delete their page. As if people aren't still stitching that video, and we know exactly, and my favorite thing about the internet these days, I mean, this is like probably kind of harmful, but my favorite thing, and just the idea of like community policing, it's almost like community justice that we find on the internet, where if someone did something wrong or did someone wrong or did a community wrong, they can't outrun it. I don't believe in doxing, like let's not let it get violent, right? But people will not let you forget their name. It's like people can try to delete and all that, and they're like, no, that was so-and-so. She did that. And they let it be known in all the comment sections, and they stitch it, and they're like, this person did that, and like, we're not going to let them forget. It gets a little crazy sometimes, but I think that's just something to consider when you're trying to outrun something, instead of kind of just specifically being like, look, that was crazy of me, or like, I shouldn't have done that. If you do need to get on camera, because a lot of the video creators are getting on camera, so get on camera. If that's your medium, if that's what you do, then that should be easier for you to be able to just do that. I would say just like get in and get out, girl.
Yeah, figure it out quick. That's making me think of Hannah Brown. Did you hear about this?
Hannah, which one was this?
Not the Hannah Brown from The Bachelor.
Okay,
Whatever,
which
but
one
the
was
one, the influencer who went to the Charlie Kirk memorial rally.
Yes.
First of all, that was what, almost a year ago? People haven't let her get a good night's sleep since then. I'm still seeing, I'm pretty sure she pulled the video down, and I'm still seeing, to this day, stitches, parodies, people just bringing it up in random comment sections. Hannah Brown has not known a moment of peace since that video came out. I think that's a great example. You can't.
That is the example. Yes.
You can't outrun it.
Like, you can't outrun it. It just really shows that obviously, like, the internet can be really, really ruthless. But it just goes to show that when there's little accountability, people will make sure there's some sort of accountability for you. Whether you're a brand, whether you're a public figure, whether you're a social media influencer, there has to be some sort of acknowledgement. And even if you don't have some sort of like rollout of an apology or something super formal, it's more about if people believe you. It's just more about if it was really something where you're like, I see why you guys would be upset about this. It's more so kind of like breaking that fourth wall, right? It's not even just like, wow, like I'm really sorry. It's more so like, I'm this type of person or brand or creator, and I did something that I could see is out of character as somebody who's viewing the situation. I acknowledge that that might have been confusing, jarring, weird, like whatever word you want to put there. And then it's like, I'm watching that like, yeah, it was. Now it's like my feed is moving. There's so many other things. I'm not going to dwell on it because you said what you needed to say.
And I believed you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is there anything else you would want people to know next time they see, or want them to keep in mind next time they're seeing one of these notes app apologies or video apologies?
Yeah, absolutely. Play a game with yourself. Next time you see some sort of public apology, I was sorry, I was about to start ragging on the format.
Oh my God,
whichever
please.
whichever format of a horrible text apology or video, I would like you to actually also think, what's at stake for that person? That's kind of a fun game that I like to play, where I think about, just to go back to like Wes Wilson and Amanda Petula, where it's like they have brand deals. They have another season of a new show that they want to be on. Sometimes there's these things at stake, and it kind of helps with the psychology of who they're apologizing to and why. We want to believe everything's like super genuine, like you really care about the fans. But a lot of times it's, hey, I have to acknowledge this because there's a lot of money tied to it or other opportunities. And so it's just kind of a fun little game to play to see who are you really apologizing to.
Okay, I love that. I'm going to do that next time. And I also think it's interesting that you use that example because I think I heard Wes Wilson isn't coming back.
Yeah. He's not coming back. Neither is Amanda now.
Oh, she's not? Oh, take from that what you will.
Yeah, and then brand partners stopped working with her right after, like there's a couple things that she was slated to have, and this happens a lot in a lot of the creator economy, for example, where you're just like, people are looking at public perception. And so a big part of that public perception, if you're super unapologetic, they might feel like you're not a good brand fit. Right. In terms of like, hey, I don't care about what people think of me. And then they're like, oh, that's sort of a brand risk. And not unapologetic in a good way.
But no, I get what you're saying. We bake that into our creator contracts when we sign with them on behalf of a client. And many creators want to negotiate it out. That is non-negotiable. Because if you're putting the brand at risk, we can't be associated with it.
And vice versa with creators and some of these brands will embarrass you.
Yeah, they will, and they won't care at all.
Some of the alignment that they've had, that's like, we could do a whole other episode about it.
We really could. Tune in for part 2.
Yeah, we have a part 2 and 3 coming because I kind of want to get into a lot of this some more. But yeah, I would say those are the things to like look out for, and ask yourself if you feel like that, if you really believe them, or if you felt like that's something that is put into place and serve the purpose of just getting it out there and moving on.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap up. What movies are inspiring you right now?
What movies are inspiring me? I will say that I just actually rewatched this on the plane, and it just reminded me how beautiful Moonlight was.
Oh.
So, clearly I wanted to cry.
Moonlight. Yeah, you picked a doozy.
I was clearly
for a plane ride?
This is me. I was feeling some type of way. But the inspiration behind that, it just reminds me that there are so many beautiful stories that we really get to tell. And I think also just in the spirit of, it was just Pride Month. But as we were in the middle of Pride Month and like thinking about that story, a lot of the stories that we don't always get to hear and see, I feel like that inspired me that, we need more of our stories told. And that just was such a good one, and one of my favorite movies, even though it's so sad.
Yeah, it's a beautiful movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend. And that's a beautiful takeaway. Who do you think is crushing it right now from like a PR perspective? It could be a celebrity, it could be a creator. Is there anybody that's been sticking out?
Girl, the only person on my mind right now is Olandria. It's an Olandria summer. She's living in my head rent free. She is just, between the partnerships that she's had, the visibility that she's had, the representation of her being a dark-skinned brown woman from a reality show who's been able to make a full career out of it. Also, just the type of person, I feel like she's so relatable, and she's somebody that everybody can get behind. So it's an Olandria summer. I think she's absolutely killing it from a PR perspective. I'm so happy that her team brought her on and is able to help her bring her dreams to life.
Yeah, she has an incredible team. Okay, where can people find you, follow you, learn more about you?
Absolutely. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, Tiffany Knighten. You can also follow our adventures of our agency Brand Curators at brandcurators.co. And I'm also on Instagram at @TiffOrDie.
I love it. Thanks so much for joining me today.
I had so much fun, Brie. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to many more of these conversations.
Yeah, tune in for part 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Exactly.
Where we continue to break down all apologies ever issued by anybody.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So thanks for stopping by. And if you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on what's shaping the definition and demand around the content we consume, you can sign up for the Stop newsletter, link in the show notes. I'll see you in your feed.